All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's workshop. Today we're talking about cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgeries, which are like two types of web exploits that fall under the same umbrella. If you have any questions, just feel free to put it in chat at any time, or even just say it out loud. I'm just happy to answer it whenever. So this is the links to the slide if you want to follow along on your own computer. Can an officer post that in the chat as well? All right, continue. Okay, so I guess before we start, this is just like a list of the top 10 web vulnerabilities from each year, 2013 and 2017 specifically. And I guess the main point is that, as you can see, both cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery are on the list somewhere like in the top 10. And this is just kind of like indicative of how common these types of vulnerabilities are. Like every year there's probably, millions of dollars worth of like bug bounty rewards handed out for these type of vulnerabilities. So it's definitely relevant, has been, and probably will be for quite a bit longer. So the reason why we're talking about two different exploits in one workshop is because, well, they're somewhat related in how they kind of attack other users. So I have up here like kind of a diagram of your typical like client server paradigm, right? Typically you have a central server and then you have a bunch of different clients interacting with the server. And, even when there's some sort of like dynamic web content, like, YouTube videos, people posting videos, writing comments, liking videos, so on and so forth, right? Each individual client is interacting with the server. There isn't any kind of like peer-to-peer connections usually when we're talking about these sorts of websites. And so when we say cross-site scripting or cross-site request forgery, like this cross-site term really refers to like this being able to kind of penetrate the boundary between clients, which are typically meant to be isolated, right? And so one example of what you might want to do with like a cross-site attack is like, for example, like continuing with the YouTube analogy, like say you're, a big YouTube channel and you want more subscribers. Well, one way to go about doing it is just like make more videos to get more subscribers, but another way is kind of mounting a cross-site attack to kind of trick another user into subscribing to you on YouTube without them doing anything. So somehow we're able to like impersonate a user or like be able to forge a request from another user, send it to YouTube servers, and YouTube doesn't know any better. They'll just assume that it was an honest subscription request. So in general, that's like the kind of exploit that we're dealing with. And that's why we say cross-site attack, because you're not really mounting an attack on the server itself. You're kind of mounting an attack in the sense that other clients across the network are being compromised, basically. So before we get to the actual like meat of the text, there's just like some basic web stuff that we have to go over first. So I'll kick it off to Steven.
All right. Okay, so we're just going to start with JavaScript. It's important to go over JavaScript because it's the controlling language for most of the front ends of web pages, which is what we'll be dealing with. And so obviously it can do a lot of things. We're just going to go over the few important things for this workshop. The first one is inline scripts. And so those are just going to be written right into the middle of your HTML. When it gets to the script tag, it's going to say, oh, this is JavaScript. I should be executing it like JavaScript. Kind of like when it gets to a B tag, it'll print it out in bold. And so just like any other tag, you're just going to stick it right in the middle of your HTML, and it's going to render it like JavaScript. And the second thing is loading resources. Basically, you can use these sort of SRC tags to refer to external JavaScript files, meaning it's not written into the page in any way. It can be a relative path, so it can be part of the page somewhere else, and you can link it, or it could even point to a totally different web page, and you could link its content into the page with loading resources. And then the third thing is the handlers, you use these to say like, oh, when this happens, you should do something. And so basically, there's a lot of different instructions when the page loads, when the page is closed, when the user clicks a button, all sorts of things. JavaScript manages when those happen and what should be done when those things happen. And in general, these kinds of things make web pages dynamic. They give it dynamic appearance and content. They can also manage the cookies, which we'll get into in a second. But these things can be a problem if it's exposed in some way. Oh, shoot. Did I disconnect?
I mean, you're back, so.
Okay. When did?
I don't think we missed much.
Okay, let's just go ahead to cookies then. Okay, so basically cookies are a way to identify your computer when you're browsing the internet. The basic idea is websites have so many users, and each user does so much stuff on the site. It's just too much for the website to store and manage all of it. So it's going to track your data, and then it's going to have you store that in your own computer on your own browser. And so this is important because the websites need to be tracking you at least to some extent to give you dynamic content that's meaningful to you. And so a few things that cookies are used for. One is authentication. You log in, the server will give you a cookie, and that's how you stay logged in. You'll notice on a lot of sites, these do expire. Like you'll log in, and then after a week or maybe a few hours, depending on the expiration time, it'll say your session has expired, please log in again. In that middle period, your cookie had not expired, and so it was saying, oh, you've got the cookie, you're logged in, this is fine. Another thing cookies do is record activity. So like if you're online shopping, all the items you viewed, the things you put in your shopping cart, those are often stored as cookies. And then the last thing is third-party tracking. Sometimes if you're on one website, ads from another website, or even an ad service like Google Ads can assign you cookies for other websites or just general cookies. And that's how you'll get ads for like unrelated sites across different pages while you're just doing random things online. And so you can kind of see there's a diagram. This is the edit this cookie extension. You can just kind of see the different parts of the cookie there. But the general idea is that cookies are, in a certain sense, they're a unique identifier for you. And so, as you can probably guess, there's a lot of things that could go wrong if somebody got a hold of your cookies, like especially the authentication ones, because then essentially they'd have a hold on some way to pretend to be you online.
Wait, okay, so we have a question that says, what data does the site itself hold versus stitching to your computer to store? So I guess when we're talking about authentication, let's just like do that concrete example. That's like what this cookie on this picture is. It's like an authentication for the cyber website. Basically, the browser stores a cookie, and the server also stores the same exact cookie. And so basically, whenever a request comes in to the server that has that same cookie, then the server can match it and then match that to a user. So for authentication, the server would hold the same copy because the cookie's only purpose is for like authentication. But there are like other usages, but for that, the server would hold the same amount of data. Follow up, do people encrypt cookies then? No, cookies are not encrypted. Cookies, like for authentication purposes, cookie is just a randomly generated piece of data. It has no special meaning other than like it being hard to guess, right? Because you don't want to just like fake spoof like authentication. Yeah. Anything else? All right, yeah, okay, so let's move on to, okay, wait. All right, let's move on to the actual demo. So before we actually get into cross-site scripting, I thought it'd be good to actually put the demo first, just so that we can have like a good idea of what's going on, like interactively. So I'm just going to switch to another window. Okay, so this is the site postbin1.acmcyber.com, port 10,000. This is also the same site that we're going to be using for all of like the XSS challenges. So if you want to actually like follow along, you can just go to the 30-point XSS challenge on the Cyber platform and then visit the postbin, and then you can like follow along. You could even solve the challenge because we're basically going to go through the whole thing short of submitting it to the admin. Okay, so this website is pretty simple. It's like, I don't know if any of you guys have used Pastebin before, but this is the same thing. I just called it Postbin. You can just write whatever you want, like write hello world, and you can create a post. I submitted it, and then you can see this post has a unique URL, right? And then it just has the words hello world, right? Because that's what we entered. And that's it. It's pretty simple. So where exactly can we find a potential vulnerability? So also on the bottom here, I just have like an inspect element tab open, so I can like view the source HTML, the network activity, so on. But as you can see, like we have the normal HTML, and then we have like just the string hello world. Yep. And I guess what's interesting about HTML is that like it's not plain text exactly. Like obviously here we have hello world and then just displays hello world, but you know HTML is much more powerful. You can use it to kind of mark up different text, right? Because that's the whole point. So like for example, like what if we wanted to make the hello world text bold, and then this part is not bold. All right, let's just enter that. Okay, and then you can see like, you know, what did we submit? We submitted like a less than bracket, B greater than bracket, and then hello world, and then some more angle brackets. And you can see that's what it looks like in the actual source code. I can also like view page source, and you can see this is our post. But this post is rendered as HTML, and in HTML, these angle brackets have a special meaning. They're HTML tags, yeah? And so when we actually render it in the browser itself, the angle brackets aren't shown. Instead, hello world becomes bold, while everything outside of the bold tags are not. Hack, yes. And so this works for basically any HTML element. I'm open to suggestions. Does anyone want to like just give another HTML element to test? Just post in the chat. Hey, yeah, link. Okay, I'm gonna plug my personal website. priv.pub. Click me. What else? We're not doing scripts yet. We're going to do that later. What else? Button. Yes, we can do buttons. I forget the syntax for a button actually, but maybe it's just this. I don't even know. No. What else? I mean, I'll just add some other things. It's like a horizontal line. Input, yeah, sure. What type of input? We can do like radio input. I don't even, does this work? BR, that's just in, sure, new line. Okay, more stuff. All right, that's it. Let's just like submit this post and then see what it looks like. Okay, so first of all, right, we have the hello world in bold text. Then we just have the normal string not bold. Then we have a link, and it's a proper link. If we click on it, we get to my website. What else? We have a button. We can click it. And then we have a input. It's a radio, so you can like select it and then select other things. And then we just have like BR, which is a new line, and then some more garbage text. Okay, so this is all fine and good. We kind of like just destroyed like or vandalized the post because, you know, post is supposed to just be normal text. But here we have all of this like special HTML rendering in the browser. Yeah, it's not good. It's kind of annoying, but this is, you know, in terms of like from a security perspective, it's also not that interesting because it's just displaying weird stuff, but we can't really do anything with it. And I think someone else pointed it out in the chat, but there's more we can do. In particular, in HTML, you can execute JavaScript. And you do this by using another set of tags that we haven't used before, but someone mentioned in the chat, and that's the script tags. So when we have script tags, we can execute whatever we want. Oh wait, yeah. So for example, this is a handy function in JavaScript called alert. It basically creates a pop-up on the screen whenever you visit, like whenever it executes. So like we could just do an annoying pop-up, and it just says pwned every single time. We could, if we like refresh the page, it's going to do another pop-up again. And well, this is kind of annoying as well, right? But again, that's not really that bad. It's just a pop-up. But what is like one thing that we might find important on a website? Hint, we talked about it in the presentation. Does anyone have any like ideas? Like what's some useful thing that a browser client has that we might want to get our hands on maybe? Cookies, yeah, cookies. So does anyone remember how to access cookies from JavaScript? I think this was like from the last workshop. Yeah, document.cookie. Yeah, so let me just add a dummy cookie in this website. So I'm just going to go here in the applications tab and then add a cookie. We're just going to call this secret blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right, so now we have a cookie. And well, instead of like alerting just this random string, how about we like alert the cookie itself, and we can access it in JavaScript via document.cookie. Okay, so once we visit this post, it indeed does show a pop-up, and instead of saying "oh," now it just says secret equals blah blah blah, which, if you remember, is what our cookie is. And we can just confirm that's exactly what it is in JavaScript, right? If we just do execute in the console, we get the same exact string. And okay, that's great. We've alerted it, but you know, if we were to send this link to someone else's computer that we want to steal cookies from, again, it's not very useful, right? Because all it's doing is making a pop-up. Like, if anything, it's telling them to stop using this website because suddenly, like, you know, it's just showing their cookies out in public, but it's not giving it access to us. And so one way to extract cookies from someone else's browser is to basically, you know, extract the cookie in the JavaScript, but instead of doing like an alert or anything, you make another HTTP request to your own server, and you just include the cookie in the data of the request. And so when you control that server, you can basically log all of the requests that it receives, and when it receives like the cookie, it will just print it out. And so there are a lot of useful sites that basically just log requests sent to it. I'm going to use something called requestbin.com. Or wait, this is not the one I want. Let me just search up requestbin. Yeah, requestbin.net. I mean, they're all the same, but this is like the one that I usually use. So I'm going to create a request bin, and the request bin has this bin URL. And basically, whenever we visit the bin URL, we get it will log the request. So like I can make I can like do a curl request. Let me. This is annoying. It's okay, whatever. It's not pasting. We can just visit in my browser. So if I visit this URL, well, it returns our IP back to us. But more importantly, it logs the request in here, and you can see like this was a couple seconds ago from like the user agent, our browser, and then it includes all of the headers. And so, you know, if we wanted to make a request to it from the actual JavaScript itself, there's a useful function for this, and it's called the fetch function. So if we go back here and we go back to like making our own JavaScript, what we can do is basically perform a fetch request. And then append the document.cookie to it after this question mark. The question mark basically is like the query parameters of the request. And so what this will do basically is fetch will send a GET request to that request bin server along with the cookie. And then once we submit that request and we go to the request bin, it logs the cookies. And so that's kind of like the overall idea from which like we're going to show like a proof of concept of cross-site scripting. The idea is that can you extract the cookie from another client's browser session as long as they visit your link. That's our kind of threat model. And in all the challenges, including this one, the flag is basically just going to be a cookie on the admin's browser session, and it's your job to extract it. But yeah, so you can imagine if I have like two different users here and I sent this URL to another user, right? They have no reason to distrust it because it's like it's just a general URL. But if they visit it, it would log their cookies, send it to the request bin, and then we would basically be able to see them. So yeah, that's the general idea behind the XSS. Let's return back to the slides.
Oh, wait, William, I think someone was asking if you could show your input again.
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry. I know it's like kind of small, but it's also going to be on the slides, so I can just show it there where the text will be bigger. Okay. So here's a recap. If you want to reference it later for solving the challenges, you can just go to the slides, like right, we have it linked. But here's the overall idea of XSS. What sorts of websites can we target? We want to target websites that basically dynamically display user-generated content. In this case, we just like made a post and then it would display it. And in particular, it displays it as raw HTML. And when it's raw HTML, oh wait, someone asked a question. Let me go to it. Alex asked, so that's why XHR requests are so picky about. Could you elaborate on that? In most browsers, yeah. Hello, Alex, or?
Yeah. I think it's because I was doing some web dev for this and I had to send stuff to the back end, right? And it was something along the lines of like, it won't send a post request unless both your server and the server that you're trying to send it to are HTTPS, which obviously they're not in the dev environments.
Yeah, I guess that's not related to this, but yeah, that's a thing where basically, if you're on a secure connection, they don't want you to start making insecure connections that you can't downgrade. But yeah, that is a thing. Okay, so back to like XSS, right? We're targeting websites that display user input as raw HTML. And you can basically test this, like we tested here initially by just like seeing whether for example, the bold tags result in like bolded text. Our exploit is instead of like just prettifying our text with normal HTML tags, we use script tags to basically execute arbitrary JavaScript on other people's browser sessions. And what's the consequence? Well, one of the consequences is that we can extract cookies from other people. And once we have their cookies, we can authenticate as them to the server. And we can perform arbitrary requests as that user. So for example, subscribing to another channel on YouTube, or deleting your account, or deleting all of your videos. Like anything you can imagine that a user can do, once you have their cookies, you can do it yourselves. And so that's obviously extremely dangerous for a site to have like an XSS vulnerability. And typically, if you were to find a vulnerability like on a big website, I think for example, Google, like youtube.com or any other big Google website, they'll pay you probably like many thousands of dollars for reporting that vulnerability. So hopefully that gives an idea of how serious that is. And in reality, if you were to actually go through with it and then actually deploy an XSS payload, you could probably cause like millions worth in damages. But yeah, so I'll again hand it off to Steven just to talk about some different types of XSS.
All right, so before we get into this, I just want to point out one recurring theme with XSS is that some part of the website, server side, client side, doesn't really matter, has to do something wrong. If it's not doing anything wrong, you can't have XSS. And that's going to come up again a little bit later with CSRF. It's an important distinction, but we'll go over that later. The point is the website has to do something wrong, and that's usually something to the effect of taking in and not sanitizing user input. And by not sanitizing, I mean like you can type in the script tags, you can type in the angle brackets, less than, greater than signs, and it's not going to do anything about it. It's just going to take it and it's going to create a response, or it's going to store it, and it'll execute in your browser, kind of like what William showed you in the demo. And so the first type of XSS, stored XSS, pretty straightforward. This is the one that was showed in the demo. Basically, you're going to make some kind of a post or input to a site, and it's going to store it somewhere in its server. And then whenever somebody accesses something that needs the code where it's stored, it's going to come across the JavaScript and it's just going to execute it within the user session. And so within the user session, you've got access to everything that they have access to, their cookies, all their information, their login, everything like that. And you can have the JavaScript send that information to you. You can have it do something with their account, with the site, anything like that. And so obviously not that hard to understand, but very dangerous in practice. If we go to the next slide, this is a very famous example of XSS. It's a good example of XSS in the wild. If you know, you already know, but here's the idea. So MySpace, it was like an old social media site. I don't think it's even up anymore. But basically just a general social media site. You can post images, make text posts, have a blog there, have a bio, followers, block people, and stuff like that. And so this guy named Sammy Kamkar found a stored XSS exploit where he could make a post and he could put JavaScript in that post, and anyone who viewed that post would have the JavaScript executed within their MySpace session. And so actually his process for finding it, I've got Sammy's little write-up linked at the bottom of that slide. It was very involved. The user input was heavily sanitized, like they didn't allow script tags. They actually only allowed 3 tags, which I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But they only allowed 3 tags, and they didn't even allow the word JavaScript to be typed explicitly in the user input. And so it was very involved for him to figure out how to get JavaScript code in there. But once he did, he wrote code that did 3 things in the viewer's session. The first one was he made them follow him. The second one was he added, but most of all, Sammy is my hero, to their bios. And then third, it added the script itself to their page. So not only did it execute for anyone who viewed his page, it then executed for anyone who viewed their pages, and so on and so forth, until Sammy had 1 million followers, MySpace crashed, the Secret Service came to his house with a search warrant, and then he was put on probation for 3 years, 720 hours of community service, and he had 1 computer that he could use that didn't have access to the internet. And so obviously, long story short, don't do those things unless the people running the website have asked you to, like, to try to find an XSS exploit to let them know so they can fix it. But this is one basic example of XSS in the wild and how things can go terribly wrong if this isn't patched on a website. The second type we're going to go over is reflected XSS. It's a little more tricky and sneaky. Not only do you have to have the website doing something it's not supposed to do in terms of not filtering or sanitizing input, you have to have the target or the victim doing something they're not supposed to do as well. And so the difference here is instead of storing the malicious script, it's just going to be submitted by a user, and then it's going to be returned immediately. and execute it in the browser, it's a one-time thing. And so you can see, like, for this to work, the person you want to take advantage of is going to have to make the submission themselves. And so unless they're like incredibly stupid, you're not going to get them to type it in over the phone or something. So you basically have to set up your own URL with the input or query with the malicious code, then get them to click on it, kind of like make a tiny URL and spam message it to as many people as you can. Obviously, like, don't do that, because if you text me a bad link, I will block your phone number, and then you would never be able to contact me, which would be very bad. But if somebody wanted to do that, they could, and then someone might click on it and it'll execute within their browser, get their cookies and all their personal information, and send it to the attacker. And so you can see that pretty easily in this diagram here. And that's all there is for reflected XSS. There is one more type of XSS called DOM-based. We're not going to go over that. I do have a couple slides on it at the very end of the presentation, so you can take a look at that later if you want. But for now, I'm just going to hand it off to Disha to talk about CSRF.
Okay, cool. So now we are at the CSRF portion of the workshop. And I'll just be going over a quick few words about what CSRF is. So as William explained at the beginning of the workshop, CSRF stands for Cross-Site Request Forgery. Here, we're trying to basically do what the title implies. We're trying to forge a request. So in order to do this attack, our goal is to trick an authenticated user into submitting a state change request. So I just kind of want to highlight some of the words that are highlighted here. And we talked about how cookies are used for authentication. So basically, we just need a user, your victim, who is logged into some application and authenticated with their cookie. As for state changing request, we want to basically we want to force the user to make some kind of request that alters their records or data on their application or the server of the application. Basically, these are things like changing some kind of record, making a transaction, purchasing something, changing passwords, and even sending messages. So why we do this is because there's really no point in having the user like trying to retrieve some kind of data, because the attacker will never receive a response since we're forcing the victim to make the request on our behalf. So basically, when we have an authenticated user, the attacker is going to trick them into making a request to an application that they're authenticated on. Since browsers automatically send over your cookies, the user is authenticated, the request will go through because the site will think that the request is legit and it came from a user that it trusts. The site has no way to distinguish where it came from as long as the cookie is valid. And I'll be showing you that in our demo. But first, there are some things that need to be in place before the attack can be conducted. So the first thing is you need to have the API of whatever request you're trying to conduct. So API stands for Application Programming Interface. Whenever you make a request to a website, there's like a predetermined set of requests that you can make. So you need to know what kind of request you want your victim to carry out. Something like if you want to purchase something on a shopping website and have them send it to your house, there must be some kind of purchase request that fulfills those actions, and you need to know what the request looks like in order to trick a user into making it. The second thing you need is some kind of attack URL. So this URL will contain your request, and the request can even be the URL itself. It can be in the website that the URL links to, and it will execute when a user clicks on it. Possibilities are endless, I guess. And then the third thing you need is the cookie. So we know why we need this. It's because the user needs to be authenticated. Otherwise, our request will never get through. Fourth thing is there is a little bit of kind of social engineering involved. We need to be able to trick the user into actually executing our attack somehow. Things like phishing are examples of this. So like if you see a weird ad on a website or an email you shouldn't click, maybe there's some CSRF attack in there. And then the fifth thing is you let your attack bake. So once you send the URL to your victim, you sit back and wait. Fingers crossed they're dumb enough to click on it, and you check whatever, like I guess account, if you're sending something to yourself or whatever, to see if it actually occurred. Right, let me actually check for the questions. I cannot do that. So I'm going to just do a quick demo, and I hope this clears things up too. So here we have, like, it doesn't say, but it's a basic bank application, and we have 2 users.
Wait, Disha, you need to reshare. We only see the slides.
Oh, all right, I will share my screen again. All right, so again, this is like a basic banking application that we have here. It's only for demo purposes, obviously. And we have 2 people on this bank, a hacker and someone named Bob. So a hacker really wants to put Bob in debt because basically Bob ran over hacker's dog in the street and now he wants revenge. Hacker knows that Bob uses a really insecure and terrible bank. And hacker also knows that Bob is super gullible and loves everything cyber related. He will click on any links, especially things that are cyber related, and these will come into play later on. So basically, hacker needs to be able to figure out how he wants to conduct his attack, and he's like determined to do it through this banking website. So first thing hacker does is he signed up for an account, and he's gonna log into his account. I am the hacker right now. Huh? I swear. Okay, here we go. I got the password wrong. So yeah, so he logs up into the account to see what he can do to achieve his goal. And since Bob is the only person that hacker knows that uses his bank, he decides to send Bob some money, a little present, before he ruins his life. So let's send Bob about $100. That's the wrong field. And click transfer. Wow, cool. Actually, I'm kind of dumb. Before we do that, actually, I kind of wanted to show y'all what it looks like. If you click on network, and I click transfer again, sorry. We can look at what the request looks like. And you can see that the request kind of looks like, although this is kind of ugly. It looks like this. So this is a GET request that has a field like that makes a request transfer to Bob, and the amount is 100. So now we know what our request should look like if we want to force Bob into clicking on it. You could have figured this out just by looking at the HTML technically if you're cool, but I'm basic, so we got it here. So now that we know it's a GET request and we can format the URL to look at like this, we basically just want to change these fields. So the to should be hacker and the amount should be whatever we want it to be. And since we want Bob to go in debt, let's say it's like over what hacker's starting account was, so maybe over 500. So actually, if we try this without Bob being authenticated, I'm going to do it on this one. If we do it without Bob being authenticated, it won't work because clearly we need him to be authenticated to this. So it'll just send you to the login page. I just wanted to show you that to like show you how the comparison about like what happens when you're authenticated and you're not authenticated. But yeah, so now let's say by some coinciding or some threatening coercive actions by hacker, Bob is authenticated into his account. So let's sign up as Bob now. I'm Bob now. Wow, cool. So we see that Bob got hacker's little present. Originally had 500 in this account. I'm just going to tell you now. And so basically now hacker knows. Somehow hacker knows that Bob logged into his account. So hacker tries to send Bob an email with that get request URL. So let's send Bob that URL. So he said, hey Bob, I know you like links, so I sent you one. And we can copy paste our URL, and we want to send it to Hacker. And our amount, how much should we send him? Actually, I can't look at the chat, so I'm going to put an arbitrary amount. Let's say 200, so Hacker can get all of his money back. This is just a test. So let's send it. Cool. Let's say that's Hacker's inbox, and this is my inbox. Okay, cool. We checked the link out, and then I clicked on it. Why? Okay, let's see what happened. Oh, wow. Look. We cleaned out $100 from his account. I don't know why that's still loading, but yeah. So Bob now lost some money, and we can actually see that Hacker now has walked into it. I'm actually very confused. That should not have happened. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm just dumb, sorry. And so amazing, it worked. Now Bob is down by, I mean, they got a net gain each, so they're back where they started. And so Hacker really wants Bob to pay, and $200 is just a really wimpy amount. So Hacker makes a super cool website and sends it in an email to Bob. I'll show you the website later, but let me send the link to the website too. And what is the second draft? Cool. I have more links, he says. And just like that. Cool. And then Bob goes to check his inbox, and wow, there it is. We click on it. It says, hey Bob, I have even more links for you to enjoy. Wow, goody me. Thanks. Wow, this looks like a really well-made website. I wonder who made it. All right, so he'll check his account. Let's say Bob checks his account, and he says, whoa, what happened? I lost $4. He could have used those $4 to like buy expensive coffee or something. I don't know. And Bob's like really furious. So let's actually just take a look at what happened. We can look at the page that he clicked on and see like what's up. There was probably something in this website that he clicked on that like caused him to lose those $4. So we actually see down here, there's an image like of size 0. We can't see it, it's like size 0. And it has this link. And actually, when you have something like this in your HTML and you click on the link, it'll load automatically. So this GET request executes without Bob knowing. Now, let's say that Bob, since he loves clicking on things and can't resist anything cyber, he chooses to click on like the diamond or the learn more button. And he didn't check the HTML, but we did. And we can see that he actually is also clicking on an image that executes this link, this request. And it says hacker amount 492. So if we click on it, we can expect that Bob's going to lose $492 and hacker will gain $492. Similarly with this button, the same thing's going to happen. So I'm just going to click on the button for shits and giggles. And even though nothing happens, we can see that Bob has negative $96. And now Hacker has even more money. And if we click on the learn more, it won't load anything, but whoops. Bob now has negative 588. So Bob is going into way too much debt because he loves clicking on these links. And I think it's like an addiction at this point, and he needs some help. But Hacker achieved his goal. So yay, Hacker. His dog has been avenged. So that is the end of this demo, and let me go back to the slides. Yeah, so just to recap on how this attack worked. Whoops. So first, Bob logged into his bank account, and Bob got a validation token in the form of a cookie. the hacker sent him a forged request, that GET request that we made, disguised as a legit bank telecommunication. And basically, Bob clicked on his links, and our forged request, the hacker's forged request, is executed by the bank using Bob's token. So yeah. Now you might be thinking, wow, this sounds kind of like XSS, but XSS and CSRF are slightly different. So XSS exploits the web browser's trust in the web server. So we saw earlier, basically like you can inject code into a web server, and then when you reload the page in the browser, it will execute that code. And XSS requires a vulnerability in the website to exploit, whereas CSRF exploits the website's trust in the browser. So like those cookies, the authentication we saw, why does this keep happening to me? And CSRF does not require a vulnerability in the website at all. So as you saw in the demo, like there was really nothing wrong with that website. It was just where forging a request, a valid request for our victim to make. So how can we protect against XSS and CSRF? Well, come to our Secure Web Dev workshop to find out. Thank you. I guess the attendance code was not up. What's the attendance code?